Well, the Athletics' Tomas Hill, Lopez-Menchero, and our Barcelona writer Pol Ballus are here. So, Barcelona through on Tuesday night after that 3-1 win against Napoli in the second leg, so 4-2 on aggregate. And when you look at it, Napoli have had a poor season overall in Serie A, they're seventh, but it still feels like quite an achievement for Barcelona to have progressed, especially due to their recent Champions League history, Pol.
It actually is. It came down as a massive relief for Barcelona because basically there was like a lot of things at stake with this game. There's been the feeling of like being an underwhelming season for a long time. I think that it's quite well reflected by the fact that Xavi decided to announce that he's going to leave at the end of the season. But this game, like, it had like a lot of elements to come down as like the moment of the season for Barcelona because like on a footballing point of view, there was this like past traumas in European football from Barcelona in the past, which was some sort of an obligation for the fans and for everything, and just for everyone like around the club to try to go through in a knockout stage game. But then there was also like the financial element on this because Barcelona had already budgeted that they were about to go through the quarterfinals. So basically, they counted in this money that involves getting qualified to the quarterfinals. So if they failed to get this, basically, there was like more money that just Barcelona were not like fulfilling in with the plans that they had been planning and that they had submitted at the start of the season. So all these elements like made this game like a big night in Barcelona. And I think that you could see by the way that Xavi celebrated at the end of the game and by how everyone was at Barcelona that they felt like massive relief with that win.
Yeah, we'll get stuck into some of the strands that you've mentioned there
Okay.
a little bit later on in the podcast because I think it's really interesting. It carried a lot of weight, this victory, and Thomas, I suppose it's worth reflecting on what's happened since Barcelona last won a knockout game in the Champions League, and it was back. Ironically, strange quirk of fate. It was against Napoli back in 2020 because they've had a bruising time since, and I guess that's why when you saw the celebrations they meant so much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Paul's totally right to say that I thought the touchline celebrations from Xavi throughout the game and his coaching staff showed just how much it meant to them, how much it meant to Barcelona as well. As you say, last time they reached the quarterfinals was the 2019-20 season when they still had Lionel Messi, Luis Suarez, Sergio Busquets, Gerard Piqué. Obviously, a very, very different team. And I also don't think you can overstate the importance of having a big Champions League win like that at their temporary home in Montjuic. We've seen how that stadium has failed to attract Barca fans in the same way as the Camp Nou, which maybe is to be expected as it's being renovated. But that felt like a big win as well, and you can bet that quarterfinal home leg at Montjuic is going to attract fans in a way that maybe even this round of 16 tie didn't.
Yeah, I mean, is that the case that they were struggling to sell it out, and there was still tickets remaining, which is quite remarkable for a Champions League game and it being a smaller stadium.
Yeah, at the end, I think that they managed to like a sellout crowd, but it's been the first time since they moved to Montjuic, basically. Yeah, and it's basically one of the themes this season. Barcelona hasn't been able to attract their long-standing socios from the Camp Nou to Montjuic. They believe it was a difficult move to go down with and to accept. That's been a tough blow for Barcelona. That, like speaking to club sources, they expected like a way better ticketing this season and a way better numbers in attendances. But yeah, finally, like the Napoli game managed to get this sellout crowd. There's also the fact that needs to lay out, not just like in some sort of defense to the Barcelona Socios here, that the experience of going to Montjuic is not the same than going to the Camp Nou. There's like a lot of seats that have like reduced visibility. It's different. It's an Olympic ground. You see football like from way a longer distance. So all these factors piled up basically to make this experience like way worse. And I think that it's been something that has been noticed by Barcelona as a team because they don't have this fear factor playing at home that they used to have at the Camp Nou. Their results at home this season have been below par. And I think that this was a thing before this Champions League game. Like, will we have this factor of playing at home and being like an element? And I think that finally, last night, for the first time of the year, it was for Barcelona.
It was interesting hearing Xavi after the game. Basically, and obviously this was loaded on the recent history, saying, who's laughing now, Tomas? It was nice for him to have a moment. Obviously, in Spain, it is vital in terms of the focus on him, but on a European platform to sort of say, we're still going here, despite everything that's going on with me and the club.
Yeah, I mean, it felt quite aggressive from Xavi in some ways. He was obviously responding to reports earlier in the season, which had kind of criticised his team. I think, like we were saying with the celebrations, with that as well, he was clearly keen to point out that he felt he'd been wronged in the press. I think Pol's actually writing an article on this, on the kind of toxicity of everything that surrounds the club. This thing called the entorno, which is a phrase coined by Johan Cruyff to talk about the kind of media and the supporters, the pressure they put on Barcelona. And clearly, I think, you know, those quotes were a sign it's been getting to Xavi, and he obviously feels that his team have improved since the announcement, which of his decision to step down, which I think we're going to discuss later in the show. But whether that's really true is debatable, I'd say. Although clearly this was a big win.
Yeah, give us a window into that, Pol. How pressurized is the atmosphere and the spotlight of being a Barcelona player, being a Barcelona manager, and everything that you have to deal with, all the external pressure?
It is incredible. I don't think that it's comparable to any club in the world. I think that in the UK, most of us can think about Man United or Liverpool for the size of the club and all the politics around the club. I think it's bigger in Barcelona and in Real Madrid. I think, like, going back to what Tomas was saying, I think that Xavi was a bit over the line last night, because basically there were a bit of like things that you could see that he had saved in his pocket from the past, that he wanted to hit back at some reports, that I think it was a bit like too much, because there's like a lot of politics in there. But yeah, basically in Barcelona, and I think that given like the current situation of the club, there's like, you have to deal like with the pressure from the club itself that we've seen like with past examples of players like Frankie de Jong, that the club itself pushed to sell him basically like a couple of summers ago. So this sort of things happen like around the club. You have to deal with the club pressure, with the sporting direction. Then you have a dressing room which is full of egos, and where everyone is like trying to get their way sorted within a club that is financially like struggling. So it's basically like everyone is like a survival mode in there, like not just from players, but from executive, from the president, and from the coaching staff. And I think that everyone is like playing their own battles in terms of narratives, like trying to sell their own version to the media and to the fans. And it's this constant like battle of narratives, basically, as I was saying, which creates like a constant like tiredness in Xavi, in players, and in executive. At the same time, I think that this constant debate is what makes Barcelona great, and it's what makes like so many fans and so many people love to follow what's happening around the club. But I can see that Xavi, after like struggling in a tough season for him, basically he decided to say that he's had enough.
We're going to talk about some of the younger players that Barcelona have been reliant upon a little bit later on, but I wanted to carry on Xavi, because I think it's really important, because it's been one of the dominant storylines for Barcelona this season. If you look at the run that they've been on, including the victory over Napoli, since he announced that he was going to be stepping down at the end of the season, after that game against Villarreal, when they lost 5-3 at home, 9 games, 6 wins, no defeats. They're now 8 points off the top, Real Madrid. They're 1 point behind Girona in second. The results have been really good. Have the performances been as good? And does that matter?
I'd say the performances haven't really lived up to the billing that Xavi's given them. He's definitely said a couple of times that they've improved since the announcement of the departure, but I don't know. I mean, the results were definitely a factor in him stepping down, clearly being so far behind in La Liga. Then what happens in the Copa del Rey as well. But I do think that a lot of Barca fans' gripes with Xavi have also been about the style of play, right? Because this is a player we associate with that team managed by Pep Guardiola alongside Iniesta Iniesta in midfield, and clearly that's a totally unrealistic expectation to have. But I think we expected Xavi's team to play the kind of football that we saw for that third goal last night, which just hasn't been in evidence this season. He still deserves credit for having won that league title last season, the first since Lionel Messi left the club. But I think a lot of Barca fans are definitely disappointed with the football they played, and I'm not sure that's really changed since his announcement.
But I totally agree with Tomas. I think that in terms of results, I mean, it's undeniable that like the numbers are great for Xavi, and that's what he's hanging on. Like when he's trying to justify, like, look, my last 9 games, 6 wins, 7 draws. There's been a change in there, but I don't think that the players haven't changed much in terms of like their attitude. I don't think it was a problem of attitude. I think that the players were putting the effort. It was just a football problem. They were not ticking. And Xavi has had to deal with a lot of injuries and key injuries. Now he has Pedri and De Jong and Gavi out. He's got a lot of key injuries, like in midfield especially, which is the position that he believes that it has to be like the heart of the team. But at the same time, when everyone was fit, like Barcelona was also like struggling to play out like in a game that Xavi could be proud of in some regards. And basically I think that this is what has caused more like frustration or over the fans, in my opinion. But yeah, at the end of the day, like seeing that Xavi has been able, at least he has like the point that he managed to give the club like a title last season, and this season he's been able to provide this Champions League next step, which was also like a long awaited thing for Barcelona.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to the game against Napoli, he was asked as to whether winning the Champions League would change his decision to leave at the end of the season. He said, no, even if we won it, I would be leaving. I wanted to ask you, if he had gone out of the Champions League last night, do you think that would have made the situation or reverted it to that toxic situation again, and they would have potentially have got rid of him early after going out of the Champions League? Tomas, I'll come to you on that first. Pol, you can have a think about it as well.
I mean, Xavi wasn't that clear in saying like, I'm definitely going to leave at the end of the season. It's been a constant theme as well, I'm going to tell you, over the last weeks, because when Xavi has been asked about like, are you definitely going to leave? Because there's like rumors inside the club that they would be willing for you to reconsider your like decision and just to stay. And like the main quote that Xavi has left over those days has been, as of now, nothing has changed. And it has been received as like a really calculated speech from Xavi, because basically he wants to wait and see. I think that his intention is like to leave, but if like something incredible happens at the end of the season, until the end of the season, I wouldn't dismiss like senior figures from Barcelona going to Xavi and telling him, look, have you thought about it? And then let's see what happens. But yeah, then on the other side of the knife, like that, there were like a lot of reports in Barcelona, like senior sources from the club, saying that if Barcelona had lost last night against Napoli in a bad way, Xavi would have been gone. Which at the same time, for me, it's like nonsense, because like if you're out from the Champions League and you have nothing else to compete for, I think that in La Liga, Xavi is in a good place to like secure like a spot for the next Champions League. So basically, like the mission is accomplished. Well, what you have left is accomplished. You have like no real options to take over Xavi. So it's like a rushed decision, in my opinion, as well, to get rid of Xavi now.
In terms of the potential talks about him, staying, I suppose that maybe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, might push discussions about who would come in maybe down the line a little bit, his replacement. So is there talks about who would replace him now? Is that almost like a snowball that's gathering weight?
No, I mean, there are talks about potential candidates, like especially with all the names that are going to be available like in the next summer window in terms of managers. But from the club, they don't seem to be like in a particular rush, basically because they don't know how much money they will have available in summer. They just depend on like how they perform in La Liga, in which spot they finish, what happens with the Champions League, which impact this is going to have with the budget, because the impact that he has in the planned budget that they had last summer is going to have an impact as well on the salary limit for next season, because this is basically how La Liga salary limit calculation work. So it's a bit messy, but Barcelona is just like a bit of wait and see what we can do next season. But as of now, what we know is that at the state that Barcelona is right now, they cannot pay for a manager. They cannot pay a fee to get a manager from another club. So the ideal situation is like to get a manager that is like free of a contract. At the same time, they are unsure if all the managers that are available without a contract right now are the best fit for the club. So that's why basically like inside the highest officers are like, well, we know what the atmosphere is. We know how the market is looking right now, but we're going to wait a bit and we're going to see what happens. Because at the end of the day, another thing that Barcelona needs to know, and I think that they know deep inside, is that they will probably have to face like a big sale in summer. But yeah, it just all braced for another interesting transfer window in like 3-4 months in Barcelona.
Tomas, obviously, Pol has mentioned that the reasons why it's difficult for Barcelona to attract a top manager. You know, you have to pay money, etc., etc. But do you still think that there's a cachet attached to being a Barcelona head coach that might make those people that, okay, they might not be affordable, maybe try and make it possible and want to go to Barcelona, despite the fact that there are financial issues?
Yeah, there definitely still is. I mean, Barca is still one of the top 3, top 5 clubs in the world in terms of that prestige. Obviously, Real Madrid as well are up there. But both of those teams, I think, no matter what the situation they're in, managers are going to want to be in charge with them. You see it a bit with the players as well. I mean, why else did Ilkay Gundogan come to Barcelona last summer? Okay, they're La Liga champions, but he'll have known better than anyone the kind of problems they were in financially and you know what the problems that were to come on the pitch possibly. But there's still prestige attached to it. There's still a lot of honor attached to representing Barca. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. If anything, we've seen that through all these kind of, you know, off-pitch problems, issues, scandals, it's stayed as strong as ever. So I don't really see what could affect that.
Well, I think it's really important to talk about the role that youngsters are playing in this Barcelona side at the moment. And producer Mike, he dug out a tweet from August 2020 before Barcelona played and lost very heavily against Bayern Munich in terms of the average age, which was 29 years and 329 days. It made it the oldest lineup that they've ever named for a Champions League match. And as it always is on Opta, it was an Opta stat. The last word or the last 2 words was know-how. Last night against Napoli, on Tuesday night against Napoli, the average age had dropped down to 26.3. And that was probably even bumped up by having Robert Lewandowski in the side. And he's 35 years old. They've had 5 transfer windows, 15 signings, and over 200 million euros spent since Xavi's arrival. Yet they're still so dependent on young players, in particular, 2 players from the academy. And let's talk about Lamine Yamal, who I was just checking has played 90 minutes or more in 9 of the last 12 games, and he's still only 16. Pol, how do you balance out looking after him, managing the load on him, but also having to play him because he's so bloody good?
Yeah, this is like the big question right now in Barcelona, and it's becoming like a sort of an obsession for the current coaching staff because they have the examples of Ansu Fati and Pedri, 2 guys that were like wonder kids, and that at some point were like Barcelona was so over-reliant on them that, I mean, we don't know if they are broken. I'm not going to say that, but they've had like their injury struggles and there are like doubts about how they will overcome that and be back like the players that they were back in the day. So basically they want to avoid that with Lamine Yamal and Pau Cubarsí. And that's a big question that Xavi has. According to the coaching staff, they have like personalized design plans for both players because it's not just like the physical charges that they need to deal with, but also like the mental pressure that it involves like being the main guy at Barcelona. But the reality is that Lamine Yamal on the attacking end, he is right now. And Pau Cubarsí on the defensive end, like last night, he became like possibly, well, he was the MVP of the game, and he was like a massive revelation as he's been in over the last month for Barcelona. With Lamine Yamal, there's the extra charge that he's really likely to go to the Euros next summer. He has already been called up by Spain. He has scored, I think, a couple of goals for Spain as well. So the amount of like expectations and pressure and talent that he has is like unprecedented almost. And it's something that Barcelona, and I think that Barcelona and the Spanish FA and everyone involved in managing the career of these young players, they need to have a chat, and they need to have a long-term vision in order to assure that those are players for 1 decade and not just for a couple of years.
For people that haven't watched Lamine Yamal, and it's interesting you mentioned that, you know, they've hopefully learnt some lessons since Messi, you know, with loading too much pressure on young players and hoping that they were going to be the next Messi. Is he close to that sort of quality, that the sort of the Messi stardom, or is that an impossible star to try and reach?
Yeah, like the Messi standard is like impossible. You cannot. I mean, you have to assume that he's going to be below Messi, and you cannot compare him to that. But having said that, I think he's top of the class in Barcelona. He's one of the best talents that Barcelona has ever produced by far. He's a right winger. To all the English audience, maybe I would compare him a bit to Riyad Mahrez, because he has this sort of like good control of the ball, this soft touch, but like he has this this freshness of like being young, that he can dribble opponents, and he's just so lucid. Like being 16-year-old, his decision making is like really, really good, and that's what makes a difference in the Barcelona side. That sometimes they feel a bit rushed and they feel a bit like all over the place. And him with 16-year-old, when he gets the ball, he knows what the teams need, and that's basically for a lot of reasons. But one of them is like what we have discussed a lot of times, like the know-how that Barcelona have. He has been playing so many times within Barcelona's system, within Barcelona's idea, that it comes natural to him just to get the ball and know what he has to do and to know where all his teammates are. So basically, that's the sort of player that Lamine Yamal is. I think that Ansu Fati, for example, that he had like a similar amount of hype. He was more of a goal scorer. When he got the ball in the box, he know how to score. Lamine Yamal is a more all-around player. He can get the ball wherever in the pitch. He can assist, he can dribble, he can score goals. So he's really complete. And he's one to watch. I think he's a generational talent, but now he's in the hands of Barcelona and the Spain national team just to manage that.
Yeah, he's a wonderful, wonderful player to watch. And obviously against Napoli, as you mentioned, Pol, we saw 17-year-old Pau Kubasi get the player of the match in his Champions League debut. There's a great video of him on social media going back through the tunnel, past Xavi, embracing, going into the dressing room, the players, you know, mobbing him, and then chanting his name, which was also chanted in the stands as well. Tomas, in terms of, you know, his emergence, has he been one that they've been talking about and planning for this moment in the Champions League, or is it just we need to thrust him in and hope that he lands on his feet, which he did?
Yeah, I think there has been a degree of that with all the youngsters this season. Yeah, Kubasi's one of the ones who's come in this season and just looked unflustered from the start. But maybe where Barca have had to turn to him with other centre-backs who were so impressive last season, not exactly performing. Same thing really maybe with Fermin Lopez as well, who obviously scored the opener. I think it's proof that La Masia is still so important to Barca. You know, their famed youth academy. It's been the kind of one positive in many ways, sustaining fans through some of the recent years, through some of the recent troubles. And I guess for the observers, that's what makes their, you know, spending so much in transfer markets, pulling these financial levers so frustrating, because you kind of think, are players like Joao Cancelo and Joao Felix, for instance, really giving you something you haven't got at home in the youth academy, right? And I think that's why they're so important for Barca in years to come. And we might come on to this, but conversely, it might be a bit of a problem as well, because those players, if they're sold, represent pure profit to Barca. So there's this kind of double-edged sword in their success.
Yeah, tell us about, I mean, obviously we know about La Masia, but in its current guise, Pol, how is it viewed? Is it seen in a way now of doing exactly what Tomas has mentioned there, just sort of getting them out there and getting them sold, or do they still see it as we need to generate the future of Barcelona? How do they balance that out?
I think that, I mean, when you speak to players, to young players, and to people who is close to those talents in La Masia, they believe that they are exciting times for being in La Masia, because now, like, all the players, they will have a chance at the first team, and it's certainly like one of the best teams to be like if you're a young player and you want to break through the elite of football. I'd say that the vision that there is inside the club right now is that the players are still like closer to making it to the first team rather than to being sold, basically because Barcelona has not been a great selling team. They hasn't registered like amazing sales from their academy players. Just in the same way that I would say that Real Madrid has done in the past, because Real Madrid has sold players such as, I don't know, Alvaro Morata, I can remember now, like with a really good amount of money, with a really good price tag. And I think that Barcelona has not been able to do that. But with the like of Pau Cubarsí, I think that it was a bit of both, because Pau Cubarsí was like the center back to watch, like the center back that was tipped to be the next big thing. But he was like too young, that a lot of people in Barcelona and inside the club believe that it's possibly not the time for him to be there. Because like in a normal Barcelona, I don't think that Cubarsí would be there, because he's just like 17 and he probably needs like one season with the second team in Barcelona, just learning a bit more the ropes of the business, and then make the break at the first team. I think that from that age bracket, like as I was saying, like in a normal Barcelona team with a sane financial state, possibly Lamine Yamal, for the sort of talent that he is, would be the only player that would be making his starts and his early like contribution with the first team. But now they are like fundamental pieces of that Barcelona team. And I think that Pau Cubarsí has everything to shine, because he's like, Barcelona has been struggling like with the build-up throughout all the season, and Pau Cubarsí, when he just came into the pitch, he just knows everything, and you don't need to tell him anything, basically. And you put him next to Araujo, and he's the best guy in the team, like in the build-up. He knows how to spot passes. And that's a bit of the same that I was saying with Lamine Yamal, the fact of like he's been playing for that. He's a childhood fan of the club. He has like a deep Catalan accent when he speaks, which is something that the fans like really love. And yeah, I think that there's no doubts, like in Barcelona, like even more like after seeing the outcomes of the last couple of games, that they need to double down this gamble on the youngsters and in La Masia, that there's no other way for the future. And that's what makes like it an exciting time to be a Barcelona youngster right now.
Yeah, and it's going to be fascinating to watch his progress, in particular, Cubarsí. And it's worth for people listening to dig out an article on The Athletic, which is out now, all about him and his history and his family background, which is all to do with carpentry and things like that. It's a fascinating article, and also it shows you've done well if people are chanting your name after, you know, obviously he's been playing more than just in the Champions League, but a Champions League debut, and you've already got a chant. You're going along well. I just wanted to flip it to the older guard, and just a quick word about Robert Lewandowski. 35. I was just checking there. He's still got a contract until 2026, and I think there's an option for a further year as well. Is he still playing as big a role in this Barcelona side? Obviously, he scored against Napoli, and can you see him being a key player for Barcelona for a couple more seasons, or is that length of contract potentially going to be beneficial if they can, I don't know, somehow generate some sort of transfer fee for a 35-year-old? I don't know. Paul, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. No, I mean, it's a tough question to answer if like this bet on Lewandowski has paid off for Barcelona. I don't think that he's playing a fundamental role in this team right now. I don't think that he had a great name on Tuesday, a great game, despite the scoring against Napoli on Tuesday. And I think that he's a player that he's struggling like to get used to all the system, basically because he needs like a lot of like creators just to send him the ball into the box, and that's his natural area, and then he will deliver what you expect from him. But the reality is that Barcelona have been struggling in that department as well. They don't have this much of this creative power that they expected to, and that's made Lewandowski like struggle a bit too. It's going to be a key issue, his situation. I don't think that he wants to leave. That's a key aspect of it. And despite like any offer comes, I think that he's very well settled in Barcelona with life and everything, and he wants to stay. Next season, as far as we know, there's a clause in his contract that depending on the minutes that he play, he could leave. His contract could be terminated like the following summer. So I'd say that right now everything looks like, to me, as like he will stay next summer, because basically he doesn't want to leave and he has a contract here and he can stay here. But let's see what happens next season, because you would expect him to not be like the main figure of this Barcelona team, maybe, because of the age that, of course, is going to be growing, and because Barcelona will try to reinforce this change of guard with young players coming up, with Xavi is going to be fit back again, Vitor Roque, a signing from the last winter market. Barcelona is going to try to give him more importance. So you could expect Lewandowski not to have the biggest role in the world next season. But of course, it's going to be like a tricky situation for Barcelona to deal with, because salary-wise, he has a big salary. It would make sense for Barcelona to sell him. Possibly, yes, but I'm not sure that they can. So I would say that, yeah, he will stay next season, in my opinion. And we'll see from there what happens.
Three things. Go on, Thomas.
It's a tricky one with Lewandowski, because I felt like when he signed in 2022, that felt almost more like a Real Madrid transfer of old. You know, you got this proven striker coming in effectively to win you the league, which he did, right? 23 goals. He was La Liga's top scorer. But I guess the problem with Lewandowski is he scored last night, but when he's not scoring, he seems to be an issue. And then Barca just expect more of their players, right? In the build up, they're not really looking for just a poacher. It's someone who has to be involved in build up play. And I think that's what makes it. That's what means that the jury is still out a bit on whether his transfer has been a success for me.
Three things I wanted to find out before the end of this podcast, and we've mentioned it, but I wanted to maybe hand the hot potato to either Pol or Tomas to try and explain it. In terms of Barcelona's finances, I wanted to ask you another question about the Nou Camp, and you just mentioned Real Madrid. We have to talk about the Champions League draw, which is coming up. First, on the finances, who wants to take the thorny topic of levers and the current financial situation? I will leave it up to either of you. Whoever speaks first gets to explain succinctly how bad Barcelona's financial situation is at the moment. Go ahead.
I'm going to take it then. No, I think it's a bad situation. It's a bad situation because Barcelona basically, in simplistic terms, they are spending more money in salaries than what La Liga allows them to. What that produces is that Barcelona cannot register new players, new signings in, until the point that they balance this situation, basically. What do Barcelona have to do to balance that? So basically get rid of big salaries and bring in lower salaries. So that puts Barcelona in a situation of like trying to get rid of potentially big players in the next transfer window to generate profit and to reduce like the expenditure like on wages, and to try to sign players on like low transfer fees, and yeah, just to try to get them like a lower contract to try to, like, as I was saying, just to balance their numbers. Then there's also the factor of like playing abroad from the Camp Nou. The Camp Nou is being revamped, and the club expects, in the best case a scenario, to go back to the Camp Nou in November next season. So that's going to be a turning point for the club as well. But until then, Barcelona is having to fight like with low ticketing, with less attendances in the new stadium that they are playing in. So it's a tricky situation to be in as well. So for the next summer, like, expect another busy transfer window. Expect Barcelona potentially like being in talks for selling some of their big names. And expect Barcelona not being able to spend a lot of money and trying to like convince their new manager that they need to exploit like the young talent that they have in the academy and in La Masia as a way to try to become like the big force that they want to be. I think that they could be, I mean, they could do for them to be competitive in a national level, because I think that they still will have like a good team to compete in La Liga. But on a European level, I think that everyone, like basically like around the club right now, is aware that Barcelona cannot really compete with the likes of Man City, of Bayern Munich, of Arsenal, of maybe Real Madrid as well, because they have like a bit of more like established talent in the squad right now.
You've managed to ask 2 questions in one, which is good. And
Sorry
Thomas,
about that.
no, that's a bonus. And that leaves me the question at the end. Obviously, we will find out what happens in the Champions League draw, which would map out the path all the way until the final. What would Barcelona? How would Barcelona fare if it were to be Real Madrid that comes out in the hat against them? Do you think?
It'll be really tricky because on paper, I think you'd definitely say Madrid have a better team, but they also haven't been all conquering this season. You know, at the beginning of the season, they were relying on Bellingham's goals. Vinicius is coming back into it now, but yeah, it's tricky because you definitely see Vinicius and Bellingham kind of destroying that Barca defense as we saw it last night. Maybe Kobasi could do slightly better, but I think you'd have to back Madrid in that situation. I mean, whatever happens, it would be very different to the last time we saw them play in the Champions League in 2010 to 11, right, with Guardiola and Mourinho on opposite sides of the dugout. They're different teams. I think Madrid seem to be ahead in their planning, particularly bringing in young players from elsewhere, and I think they just have too much for Barca.
I don't think that Real Madrid is the worst outcome that Barcelona can get on that draw, if I'm honest. I think that Man City will be way worse for Barcelona. And I think that with Real Madrid, like, stating the fact that, of course, Real Madrid would be favourites, Barcelona, they have nothing to lose. They have nothing to lose because, I mean, in terms of, like, they've accomplished the minimum that the club expected from them. And if they lose against Real Madrid, it's going to be painful, really painful. But at the end of the day, it's something that you could expect. It's going to be important. It would be important to see how they lose, but at the same time, it's the opportunity for Barcelona to say, "Okay, let's go and play. You are the favorites, and just let's go and try to prove that you can make the point here."
We shall see. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We will have coverage of the Champions League draw, which takes place on Friday, and of course, continued coverage of Barcelona, Real Madrid. Everything that's going on in La Liga, all of the European leagues and the Premier League as well. Focusing on Spain, of course. My thanks to Thomas and Pol for your sterling work on this podcast and your continued great work. Thank you very much for joining us.